Okay. Just as my washing machine starts its spin cycle, I'm going to start reading this. Yeah, so this is chapter ship, which is chapter 4 of my book. I'm going to read today, and I'm reading the actual text. And so one of the reasons I'm doing this is to find places where I think it's needs editing. I'm making this gesture. And so kind of if I think there's something there that needs editing, I'm going to make this gesture. I might, rather than doing the sound of one hand clapping, do actually two hands clapping, because that makes it easier to see on the video, on the sound line as well. But anyway, we'll get started. And if anybody joins, I'll welcome them. Somebody has joined. Okay, hi, Dragon. Hang on a second.
Hello, Mark.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm all right. My curiosity got perked up, so I thought, well, why not? What's better to do at 1 o'clock on Saturday afternoon?
Okay, that's great. Just like you know, you've probably been told as you entered that we're recording.
Right.
So I'm going to read. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read my chapter. I'll let you know it's 12 pages long, so it's quite long. If you can't make the whole thing, that's absolutely fine. This is mainly for me, but if you can stay, that's great. And also, like, any feedback that you have, that will be wonderful.
Tell me again, how long is it, roughly?
It's 12 pages, so it's probably going to be about half an hour, maybe a bit more.
Okay, I can live with that.
Okay, so I'm gonna put you on mute and I'm gonna start reading, if that's okay. By the way, can you hear my washing machine in the background?
No.
Okay, that's good, because it feels to me like it's making an enormous amount of noise. Right, okay, I'm gonna get started.
You're on mute, Mark. Mark, you're on mute. It's no good.
Hello, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, I managed to mute myself, not great. Okay. Chapter ship. Never ignore the pirate ship. The main danger to any project is the refusal of the people working on it to recognize its problems. If the problems are acknowledged, the team can fix the ones that can be fixed and figure out how to manage, escalate, or work around the ones that can't. One of the great things about living in London is that you can sign up to all sorts of classes. Over the past 10 years, I've signed up for improvisation classes many times. Every time I go, I learn something. I have new experiences, and these often turn out to be useful in real life. A big idea in improvisation is to avoid what's called blocking. For example, an improvised scene starts with someone knocking on a door. The scene might go something like this. Jen, miming opening a door. Ben, hello, I brought you a cabbage. In the language of improv, the cabbage is an offer. It's something that Ben has come up with for the improvisers to play with. And so the right way for Jen to respond is to accept the offer and continue to play. Jen, brilliant. I always wanted to make kimchi. Or Jen, it's bring your own bottle, Ben, not bring your own brassica. Even though one of these responses is positive and one is negative, both are good responses because Jen accepts that Ben has brought a cabbage and builds on it. What's regarded as a bad response in improv is a response like this. That's not a cabbage, it's a balloon. Or, fine, whatever. In improv terms, this is called blocking. Jen isn't dealing with what Ben's saying. She's denying it or saying that something completely different is happening. Blocking is an important concept in improvisation because blocking kills the story. It's boring for an audience to watch. Imagine that there are a group of performers on stage for an improvised scene. To start a scene, the actors ask for a suggestion from the audience. Someone in the audience suggests the deck of a tall ship. Here's what might happen. Kevin, putting a fake telescope to his eye. Look over there on the horizon. There's a ship and a flag. It's a skull and crossbones. Now, the other performers have a choice to make. One obvious choice is to say yes and to accept the pirate ship. Janice, oh my God, the pirates are coming. Haul up the sails. Let's try and outrun them. Lena, oh my God, the pirates are coming. The cannons, load the cannons. Me, oh my God, the pirates are coming. Quick, hide in the lifeboats. All these are good selections. Of course, the audience hope that hiding in the lifeboats won't work, but will result in lots of comedy. They certainly hope that the ship can't outrun the pirates. All these improvisers are accepting the offer in the language of improvisation. But sometimes in this kind of situation, someone makes a different kind of suggestion, something like this. Nina, hey, let's wash the decks. Oliver, Pam, Quentin, Rana, and Shug. Yes, let's. Okay, maybe there's a kind of comedy in completely ignoring the obvious threat. And for the performers on the stage, this can seem like a good thing to do. But for the audience, it's a very bad idea. Once somebody mentions a pirate ship, the audience wants to see it. They want to see what a chase between this ship and the pirate ship looks like. They want to see if this crew can load a cannon, point it in the right direction, and fire it. They want to see the pirate king or queen and see what they'll do to the crew members who are hiding in the lifeboats. They want to see a plank walking scene. What they don't want to see are multiple improvisers on the stage miming mopping the floor. Improvisers who don't have a lot of experience are really tempted to do something like scrub the decks. It feels preferable to dealing with the implications of the pirate ship. Why? Because carrying on doing what you're doing feels safe. Doing something different feels dangerous. And for this reason, especially in situations where they feel that others are looking at them, no one wants to be changed. That's the realization of the This is not a problem with the text, it's a problem with me reading. That was the realization of the theatrical innovator Keith Johnston, who developed his own style of improvised theatre in the 50s. He also wrote several books, Impro and Impro for Storytellers. In his books, Johnson talks about people who are new to improvisation. He describes them wanting to do safe, repetitive activities. Washing the decks is an example of this. He refers to this as an agreed activity. He explains that putting people on a stage in front of an audience makes them scared. Scared people try to make themselves safe, even if what they're doing is making the group less safe, even if it undermines their collective aims. In the case of improvised theatre, that means even if what they do bores the audience, which is the absolute opposite of what they're supposed to be doing on stage. Part of the skill of being a good improviser is knowing how to dodge this need to stay safe. Instead, good improvisers have the courage to move the story forward by accepting an offer, by letting something interesting happen, by being changed. When they hear the suggestion, the offer of a pirate ship, good improvisers accept that there's a pirate ship. They make the story interesting and move it forward by dealing with what that means. Exactly this kind of safety has also been identified as crucial to the success in other fields, like software development, where recently it's been discussed as psychological safety. Good improvisers and good development team members spot the pirate ship and understand that tackling it will move the story forward. Good directors of improvisation encourage improvisers to do this. Good directors of software development do the same. What's fascinating is that all novice improvisers seem to know that mopping the decks is the right thing to do, right in inverted commas. There isn't a long discussion. It happens in just a few seconds, even though from the point of view of the audience, it's exactly the wrong thing to do. What this shows is how good we all are at shying away from things that we perceive as dangerous, and doing this quietly, subconsciously, and in agreement with others. We especially tend to avoid anything that will make us radically change our behavior or our ways of thinking. Johnston has one suggestion to help the improvisers avoid this agreed activity: encouragement from the sidelines. He suggests that improvisers have a director who is watching from the side of the stage and can speak out and direct them during the show. The director spots which suggestions will move the story forward. She also sees which suggestions are invitations to agreed activity and tells the actors to avoid them. Let's say a director is watching a scene where there's been a suggestion of washing the decks. She might allow the crew 10 seconds of deck washing without advancing the action. But then she will shout, "The decks are clean. The pirate ship is getting nearer. Deal with the pirate ship." Of course, the point I'm trying to make in this chapter is that the idea of agreed activity as a response to the need for safety is useful, not just in improvised theatre, but also other creative endeavours, such as software development. So part of the skill of being a good improviser is knowing how to dodge this need to be safe. And part of the skill of being a good member of a development team is knowing how to dodge this need to stay safe, or rather feel psychologically safe while pointing out problems. For example, the pirate ship. Good software development teams spot problems and call them out so that they can be tackled. Good project managers help and encourage software teams to do this. They help the team avoid agreed activity and help teams to get out of agreed activity when they fall into its trap. But here might be a big difference between improvisation and software development. In improv, the audience wants the improvisers to discover trouble and deal with it. But in software development, often the response of the audience, of senior stakeholders to bad news, is either the equivalent of booing and hissing and throwing things, or actively shouting, "Scrub the decks." Imagine that in an improv show, one of the performers shouted, "Look, a pirate ship," and the director sitting next to the stage responded by saying, "Shut up about the pirate ship. I don't want to hear any more of this negative thinking. Clean the decks. Any more talk of a pirate ship and you're off the show." On a software development project, when a team comes across something that's the equivalent of a pirate ship, just like with the improvisers, there's a strong tendency to avoid it. And it's the job of the project manager to play the director role that Johnson played in some of his improv productions and just shout, "Tackle the pirate ship." Good product owners and senior stakeholders don't shoot the messenger when someone from the team or the project manager reports that they've seen the software development equivalent of a pirate ship on the horizon. It's the job of senior stakeholders to do whatever they can to help address the issue, and whatever they do, not to encourage agreed activity. If you're an agile project manager, it's important to understand that the agile approach to managing software development provides lots of opportunities for the project manager and the team to spot the pirate ship. Every day there's a stand-up meeting. The team talks about what they did the day before and what they're going to do today. In stand-up, team members also talk about any problems that they have that are blocking their progress. Reporting these blockers is the most important bit of a stand-up, because these blockers are the project's pirate ships. Retrospectives at the end of every sprint provide a bigger chunk of time for the team to reflect on how things are going and call out anything that might cloud the horizon. But just because there are these regular opportunities doesn't mean anybody seizes them. If there's one big thing that's blocking progress, that might be the one thing that no one talks about. Remember, agreed activity is instinctive. It often happens silently and instantly on stage, and the same in development teams. Maybe everyone has seen the pirate ship, but they're saying nothing, and there might not be an obvious Jolly Roger flying and the sound of "arg." So for the project manager, the way to find the pirate ship might be to look for agreed activity. If some members of the team have the same update with no variation for days in a row, that's a sign of agreed activity. Another sign is when the team plans a task and then doesn't get it done for days, weeks, possibly months. Nobody on the team decides to pick it up. Maybe nobody has had a discussion within the team about why they don't want to pick up this task and tackle it. As with actors on the improv stage, they made an agreement, but that doesn't mean that they have talked about it. Tacitly, they all agreed not to tackle this task. In these situations, it's the job of the project manager to point to that task and ask, what is it about this that means everyone is avoiding it? Of course, it's best if the team learns for themselves to avoid agreed activity, point out the pirate ships for themselves, and do their best to tackle them. But some problems can't be tackled by the team. They need outside help. If the team identifies some problems, They explain to the leadership what those problems are, and then the leadership ignores them or gets angry or suggests that if the team knew how to do their jobs, there wouldn't be a problem. The team notices this. They understand. So they find an agreed activity, doing as they're told, doing exactly as they're told. They're smart people, so they learn almost right away when it's better not to try and speak out or think for themselves. I worked as a coach on a project that was really struggling. We had a retrospective. One big problem emerged. All the requirements for the project were written by a single business analyst. The team's main difficulty was that they couldn't understand what the business analyst had written. What struck me straight away was that the business analyst wasn't in any of the agile meetings, not in the stand-ups, not in planning, and not in retrospectives. In an agile project, the business analyst is part of the team, not outside of the team sending in requirements, especially ones that can't be understood. So my response to this problem was to suggest that the business analyst should be invited to all the agile meetings. This was where I noticed the developers looked at each other sideways. This is always a sign that you're finally getting to the real issue. We're not allowed to talk to the business analyst. What? That's crazy. I'm sure that can't be correct. Yes, it was crazy. Yes, it was correct. Well, it was totally incorrect, but that was the way it was happening. I tried to talk to the business analyst. I emailed him asking for a meeting. I got a phone call from his boss saying I wasn't allowed to talk to him. And of course, there was no way that the project was going to get anywhere in its current state. The team needed, at the very least, to talk to the person who could tell them what the product was supposed to do. My suggestion was that we get the business analyst to sit with the team and to attend stand-ups and retrospectives. When this finally happened, progress on the project started to improve. After the minor victory of getting the business analyst to sit with the team, then I suggested that we start to have show and tell meetings. For the previous 2 weeks, the team had been doing some work on the user interface for one of the very early screens in one of the fraud reporting journeys. This was a fraud project. I don't think I mentioned it earlier. A developer put up the first screens in the journey. She started to talk it through. Even though most of the people who were on the conference call were on mute, I thought I detected a change in the silence. Finally, someone said, I thought we'd agreed that we were going to arrange cases by account holder, not by account number. The developer who was demonstrating the screen looked slightly panicked. The business analyst, who we'd only just set eyes on and had just joined the team, started to look worried and scroll wildly through the requirements document. No, it's in the requirements document that cases should be arranged by account number, he said. Another awkward pause on the conference call. But that makes no sense, someone joined in. It's the people who are victims of fraud, not just individual accounts, added a different voice. We need to see all the accounts that a customer has, and we need to see the activity across all their accounts for this screen to make any sense, said another different voice. Yes, that's right. The structure of this project had been wrong from the very beginning. This problem hadn't been detected through months and months of analysis. Or had it? Had somebody known that this would be a problem and just not said anything? My guess is that a lot of people knew. It didn't matter now because it took just 5 minutes of putting the working software in front of people who might use it to unearth the problem. I'm not sure that makes sense. If you do stand-ups every working day with your team, if you do retrospectives and show and tells every sprint, you will find out what the problems are. But also, if you don't have these meetings, if you don't show what you're interested, if you don't show that you're interested in finding problems, then the team will understand. Not having stand-ups, not having retrospectives and show and tells is almost the same as shouting, scrub the decks, don't look at the pirate ship at your team. So by now, we've made it clear that for a product to have a good chance of success, we should encourage the team members to point out any problems that they encounter. And with the idea of agreed activity, we've also cautioned that sometimes there may be a problem that the team is instinctively avoiding that we need to encourage them to tell us about. Finding out what the problems are in a project, bringing them to light so that there's a chance that they can be addressed, we might think that this would take us a lot of the way towards being able to make any project far more possible than impossible. And it would, if it weren't for one slight complication. Highlighting the problems that a project throws up can be threatening to senior people involved in that project. What if the problem that comes to light is something that they haven't thought of or they don't know how to fix? They will be inclined to avoid addressing it, possibly by attacking or threatening the team for daring to raise the issue. In software development, members of development teams do the right thing and point out problems all the time. They do the equivalent of shouting, "Look at the pirate ship." But often, the response of senior people who should acknowledge these problems and thank those who point them out is something like, "You're wrong, it's not there." Other ways of responding that are just as bad are, "I'm tired of this negativity," or "Maybe you're not up to the job if you think that's a pirate ship." And that's why people don't raise problems and instead just wash the decks. This looks like a contradiction, doesn't it? The people who you would think would most want to sorry, again, this is my reading, not the sentence, I think. This looks like a contradiction, doesn't it? The people who you would think would most want the project to succeed are the ones who most risk making it fail. Why on earth would they do that? Remember how we explained deck scrubbing on the improvisational stage. Scared people try to make themselves safe, even if what they're doing is making the group less safe, even if it undermines their collective aims. And managers and senior stakeholders are people. Often the problems that the team uncover threaten their safety, and they will do things to try and make themselves safe, even when those things undermine the projects that they claim passionately to want and need. In recent years, the concept of psychological safety has been developed and popularized. It states in a more formal way something that Johnston was investigating in his experiments with improvisers, and something that we were talking about when we were talking about improvisation. Safety isn't just about physical safety. We also need psychological safety. And when we don't have it, we will change our position and behavior until we do. Psychological safety imagines that there are 4 basic levels of safety that sit one on top of the other. Level 1 is being allowed in the group, inclusion safety. Level 2 is being allowed to learn in the group, learning safety. Level 3 is being allowed to contribute to the group, contribution safety. Level 4 is being allowed to challenge what the group are doing, challenger safety. Timothy R. Clark outlines these in his book, 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. As a first step, it's good to understand that one stage of psychological safety needs to be built on top of another. And from the point of view of our metaphor of the pirate ship, it looks like we really need to be at the top of this staircase, all the way up at level 4, before as a crew member, we can comfortably shout, "Hey, look, a pirate ship." For Clark, fostering psychological safety in creative teams is about trying to do 2 things at the same time. In a problem-solving team, we need disagreements. We need different ideas. As Clark puts it, we need to increase intellectual friction. But at the same time, we don't want to spend all our time falling out, storming off and getting upset with each other. Again, as Clark puts it, we need to decrease social friction. This is extremely familiar to me. When I'm working with a team, I find myself very often having to point out that there are disagreements, intellectual friction, and reassuring the team that this is okay and doesn't have to result in anyone falling out. Social friction. Easier, much easier said than done. This connects with another idea that Clark discusses, the idea that psychological safety is about a relationship between cover and candor. The more reassurance that the leader of a team can provide that there won't be any negative effects for being honest, the more honest the team members will be. The more cover the leader provides, the more candor she will get from her team. Finally, after another day of struggle, oops, I've lost a page. This has happened before. Oops. Hang on a second. I'm going to have to read this from the computer because I've lost the page. My printer does this periodically. Okay, so the final paragraph of the previous page. This connects with another idea that Clark discusses, that the idea that psychological safety is about a relationship between cover and candor, etc. But there are two issues I have with the idea of fostering psychological safety as a full solution to the problem of the pirate ship. Firstly, real creative situations aren't psychologically safe. They're never going to be. There is always going to be a potential conflict between doing the right thing in terms of pointing out the pirate ship and being safe. If you point out the pirate ship, you run the risk not only of being shouted down or ignored, but even possibly kicked out of a team. Second, there's someone or maybe several people missing from this story about who needs to be psychologically safe. The boss, or even the bosses, the sponsor of this project, the stakeholders who backed her. Yes, increasing psychological safety makes it more likely that the team will contribute and challenge. Sorry. That's why I don't read from computer. Second, there's someone or maybe several people missing for, the sponsor of this project, the senior stakeholders who backed her. Yes, increasing the psychological safety for the team makes it more likely that the team will contribute and challenge. But what about the boss? Is she part of the team? Is she part of an entirely different organizational setup? What's her role in that team? Is she trying to get her feet under the table and just get member safety? Or is she trying to learn the ropes? Or is she really at the point where she can say to other people in her peer group, my team have identified a problem. It's something all your teams must be experiencing. I'm surprised you haven't mentioned it. Or, I think we made a mistake. We didn't expect this problem that we've now unearthed, and we're going to need to spend some extra effort to fix it. That's going to mean a substantial delay. What if your boss doesn't have challenger safety in that group that she's in? If she isn't at the point where she can say things that need to be said in whatever forum she operates in, then we have a problem. We all have a problem. The boss is in a different team, and in that team, the boss isn't the boss. This helps to explain something that I've known for a long time, but hadn't really properly understood. It's what the writer Robert Anton Wilson calls the snafu principle. Adequate communication flows freely between equals. Communication between non-equals is warped and distorted. Domination and submission rituals perpetuating communication jam. That's from Robert Anton Wilson. What does this mean? It means that even though it's right to avoid agreed activity, right for members to point out problems, it means that even though it's right to avoid agreed activity, right for members of a team to point out problems, right to stop mopping the deck and point out the pirate ship, even though this is what a team needs to do to be successful, what happens as a result of acknowledging the problems is always going to be vulnerable to being warped and distorted by whatever power structures the boss and her bosses are involved in. When we're in the process of pointing out the pirate ship and expecting senior stakeholders to help us tackle it, it's extremely useful to understand that the boss might be in a team where she doesn't have psychological safety. Of course, that may lead her to be unable to admit, let alone deal with the problem that we're bringing to light. So now what do? We think about this in terms of status. For inspiration, let's go back to Keith Johnston's book, Impro. Johnston had been trying to get the students that he's working with to have natural sounding conversations on stage. He tried all kinds of things and hadn't managed to get anything to work. Finally, after another day of struggle, he went home and turned on the TV. There was a program by the biologist and writer Desmond Morris. Morris was talking about a community of chimpanzees. He explained that pretty much everything that chimps do, who they sit with, who they eat with, and of course who they have sex with, can be explained as a status transaction. When one chimp grooms another, the chimp that is doing the grooming is affirming that they are lower in status than the chimp that gets groomed. The point that Morris made in the TV program was that these status exchanges aren't huge. There are very few fights involved. There isn't much chest beating. The status exchanges are tiny, fractional indications of who is higher and lower status, who sits higher on the tree, who has their hair picked for fleas first when two near equals agree to pick through each other's fur. And how these questions are answered shows the precise status of all the chimps in the group. The next day, Johnson went back to his drama studio and asked his students to improvise scenes. He had only one instruction for his students. Whatever one person said, the other person should try to lift themselves or lower themselves just slightly in status with their reply. Johnson was delighted with the results. Suddenly his students were having conversations that sounded like the way people normally talked. Are you going anywhere nice on your holidays? Tahiti. Ooh, that sounds amazing. I'd love to go to Tahiti. Well, my husband is working in the South Pacific, so it's easier if I go out and holiday near where he is. Are you going anywhere nice? Ibiza. Ooh, I love Ibiza. We used to go there all the time before we had kids. It's my first time. Oh, I'm sure you'll love it. Okay, now read this again. Who is high status, and what does the high status person do to slightly lower their status? Does this sound like a realistic conversation? Think of a conversation that you've recently had with a friend or a colleague. Who was lower status, just fractionally? Who was higher status? Now let's come back to the business of bad news and taking problems to the boss. The problem that project managers are always wrestling with is that bad news is humbling and threatening. A conversation where bad news is given and received is a status transaction. Johnson's insight, and Robert Anton Wilson's, is that in real life, nearly everything is a status transaction. This makes life difficult for project managers and for their bosses, but it explains a lot of the negative and unhelpful behavior that we see from bosses when they get bad news. It also explains why so many teams recognize the bad news and then instinctively tell nobody about it. And it explains why kings shoot messengers. They shoot messengers because in that moment when the messenger arrives and spills the bad news, the messenger is radically lowering the status of the king. And this is an intolerable situation for the king. But in that moment, he can easily solve his status problem. Sure, the battle is lost, but to recover his status and show how he's still the king, he can have the messenger shot. What we've established from the beginning of this chapter is that the best chance you have of making a project a success is to tackle the pirate ships that you and your team see on the horizon. We've also established senior stakeholders tend to be resistant to bad news. As a project manager, your main job is managing this contradiction. Do it in private. One of the mistakes that the messenger who got shot made was delivering the bad news in front of an audience. Do it as part of an existing relationship. The better your existing relationship, the more that your boss already trusts you, the more chance there is that they will believe what you're saying and act on it, even if what you're telling them doesn't make them feel psychologically safe and lowers their status. Try to get a one-on-one meeting with them regularly. Taking 10 minutes every week to talk them through the weekly report is good, but at least every sprint, typically every 2 weeks, you should be having a face-to-face. Try to find a Goldilocks status. Once you've realized that pointing out the problems to people who are senior to you is always going to involve a status transaction, in my experience, if you go in with too low a status as a humble servant who's just pointing out the problems, they've found you make it much too easy to swat you away. Doesn't make sense as a sentence. If you try to come in at equal status or above, you make the entire conversation about smacking down your status and reasserting the hierarchy. So what you're trying to find, remembering again Keith Johnson's investigations in improvisation, is a way of transacting with a smaller difference in status as possible, but always coming in slightly lower. Use generated artifacts. This is sneaky, but it works. Don't try telling the boss anything. Show them. What's the problem that's been reported by the development team? Given current progress, when is the project predicted to finish? Well, would you look at that? Seems it's going to take twice as long as we expected. Who would have thought it? Connect with commitment and consistency. There is a very flawed idea that project management is about keeping promises. There are lots of things wrong with this idea, and we'll explore those in another chapter. There are almost no positive aspects of this kind of view of project management, but one of them is that if senior people seek a commitment from you to deliver their project on time, typically, then you should also use that opportunity to get a commitment from them. Try bringing in someone of similar status. It doesn't say what commitment you should get from them, it should. Try bringing in someone of similar status. Is there someone who's on your side who is of the same status as the senior stakeholders that you're trying to talk to? Could you ask them to have a quiet word? As much as you can, understand the landscape. What team is your boss or boss's boss part of? What's going on? Is there a reorg? Is there a merger? Did another project fail and that means this project is in the spotlight? Who cares about this project? Who's annoyed it's happening? This is something that we talked about in chapter Swab, which is the previous chapter. And also, we've hit bedrock. This is a genuinely hard problem, and it's the one that you need to be focusing on and tackling as a project manager. I don't know where that comes from. Anyway, in summary, the situation. Teams will instinctively avoid pointing out trouble. They will tend towards agreed activity. This is especially true if anybody in the team has had experience of a negative response when they pointed out bad news in the past. The straightforward solution. Publicize the problems. As a project manager, it's your job to encourage the team to call out problems when they see them. It's also your job to spot agreed activity, places where the team seem to be working but not making any progress. If there's a problem there that nobody's talking about, you need to help bring it to light. The complication. Some problems can't be fixed in the team. They need to be escalated to people outside of the team. They need to be reported to the bosses and they need the help of the bosses to be fixed. But problems and bad news can be threatening to bosses. The sophistication. Look for ways to talk to the bosses about the project's problems that don't threaten the boss's status. Sometimes you can elevate it, do it in private, do it as part of an ongoing conversation that isn't always about bad news. Understand that you can't get this right every time. Understand that you don't have a complete picture of the stresses and strains that they are under in their own team, nor how psychologically safe they feel in that team. But also understand this is the real job of a project manager, maintaining relationships with senior stakeholders and finding ways of telling them things that they don't want to hear, but the project needs them to hear. Okay, apologies for losing page 9. I'm going to switch cameras, so if you're still there, we can talk.
I'm still here. I can't be here for very much longer. I need to go help my son something.
That's okay. I can't be here very much longer either. I'm going to go and get my COVID vaccine.
Oh, nice. I'm still scheduled then.
Any thoughts? Any comments?
Listening to you reading, ignoring the small kind of glitches, I felt it was flowing.
Yeah.
I also liked how you brought in a number of different things together, combined them into something that makes sense. I mean, together it all kind of interweaves.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all good. I don't really want to go into. There's plenty of assumptions you are making. One of the assumptions is that the team is working under the Scrum framework or following the Scrum framework, and that may or may not be true.
Yeah.
So they could be Agile, but not Scrum. They could be following something different, like Kanban kind of thing, in which case the stand-ups would be completely different.
Yeah.
I don't know how serious that is. The only thing that really I went like, hang on, is when you talk about psychological safety and you say something like, I'm paraphrasing here. Difficult situations are rarely psychologically safe. Something like that. Now, the way I understand psychological safety is something that exists in the team or it doesn't. And the team, I liked how you later bring on the stakeholders, champions, whatever that person is. But I like how you bring that in and kind of show that the team is not just the team, but the team is much broader, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
However, the safety that is, or the impact to the safety that is made, that results from the appearance of a pirate ship or a problem, is nothing to do with psychological, well, it is to do with psychological safety, but it's an external thing that will test the existence or not of the psychological safety within the team. So in your words, if the team is more psychologically safe, they will recognize the need to go into, what do you call the activity? Agreed activity?
Agreed activity.
They will recognize the urge to go to the agreed activity, what's the word? Resist it.
Yeah.
Deal with the problem or the opportunity. If the psychological safety is lower, then they will just go on autopilot and go and do the agreed activity. The pirate ship will test agreed psychological safety. It is not part of the psychological safety, is what I'm trying to say. The impression I got when you were reading was that you were extending the concept of psychological safety to the external events that happen to the team. That to me is different type of safety.
I think the issue is that I suppose it's kind of like if you see psychological safety as a dynamic thing,
Mm-hmm.
then how do you increase it? And one of the crucial ways of increasing it is when you encounter these kinds of things, if people try and essentially escalate their psychological safety, so they say, so somebody who's previously just been accepted as part of the group decides that they're going to start to learn something new, for example, which is, I think, the next step up, and they get grief for it. They get grief for learning something. Then their psychological safety won't be expanded.
Then the psychological safety of the team is low.
Yeah. So and I think this is saying, if you're at the point where, so essentially you can see kind of bad news from outside the team that is going to affect the project as kind of inherently critical, because it's basically saying, we had this view of the project. It didn't involve this thing. We're now going to have to incorporate this view in our view of the project. And at that point, if you don't,
you got to mute again. Mark, you mute it.
Could you say that again? I'm just.
You were muted.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, because my phone started ringing.
Okay.
So just say again what you were saying.
I have no idea what I was saying. What was I saying? I was saying the psychological safety is a characteristic of a team.
I think what I'm trying to say is one of the really important ways of increasing psychological safety is by showing how you deal with these kinds of situations.
Yes.
So if somebody points out something that's wounding to the project, typical things like this technology that we're relying on doesn't work in the way we expect it.
Yeah, whatever it might be. We're not talking to one another, or we don't hear it from the horse's mouth.
We're not allowed to talk to the people who actually want this thing. Classic thing. If the response to that is basically that if the person who points this out is rewarded for pointing that out, and things happen as a result of it, then that will increase psychological safety.
Yeah.
if the person who points this out is punished for that, even if it's kind of silent punishment, then
Punished or ignored.
yeah, people will just learn that really quickly.
Absolutely, absolutely. Are you talking about the process of building or destroying psychological safety?
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that the ship will be a test, an external event. What is it? What's the ABC thing?
Which ABC thing?
Oh shit! I can't remember. I have it written somewhere, but now I won't be able to find it. So slow it is. Doesn't matter. I can't find it. It's the. What is the? A lot of people have been writing about it. It's what happens, impulse. What's your internal story? How do you respond to it?
Right. Okay.
Stuff. So the
yeah,
ship, the impulse, the
stimulus.
Stimulus. Thank you, stimulus.
Mhm.
Just one more very picky thing. Well, I don't know if it's picky or not. The four levels of psychological safety, right?
Yeah.
When you say, "Hey, there's a pirate ship," and this is not me having read and studied this. This is me having listened to it, read it, and thinking about it. I think that's more contribution. You contributing into the system, and then challenging would be, okay. So, hey, look, there's a pilot ship. That's a contribution.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go scrub the floors. That's the odd agreed action, right?
Yeah.
Scrubbing floors will not help us deal with the pirate ship. Is a challenge.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So that's I think. Hey, there's a pirate ship is contribution rather than challenge safety. Is demonstrating not challenge safety, but contribution safety. You're contributing something to the system that others may not have noticed.
Okay. That's really helpful. Thanks very much for listening for so long, but also thanks very much for engaging a level of really helpful.
Hey, don't worry about it. I just felt like, I don't know. I just felt like doing something different today. So that was it. I'm gonna go back and hang the washing and do those.
Yeah, I've got washing to do as well.
All right. Well, good to see you.
Okay.
Maybe we catch up again at some point.
Very, very nice to see you as well after a long time. But yeah, where are you these days? Are you geographically where are you?
Just outside of London, southwest of London, in Surrey.
Okay. Oh, sorry. So if you're in town, like, give us a shout, and maybe we can meet up in real life. I live in the East End of London. So.
All right.
So. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks very much, Dragan.
Take care.
Ta-ra for now.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.